Well, hey everybody, and bright blessings. I wasn't actually going to do a video today. I was really tied up with a lot of editing on other videos that I would either be putting out or am thinking about putting out. Not quite sure, but I won't go into that just now. But I guess a case of nostalgia kind of took over, and I began thinking about the old days. Feeling a little bit back to myself. I'm feeling really good lately, and that might be the justification for that, why I feel so good today. I feel like I'm just starting to burst with energy again. I'm getting back into life the way I had hoped that I would do, but it took so long to get there. And I started going over things from the past. You know, you go through something like this, a dead year where your brain isn't wanting to work because of all the chemotherapy, the radiation, the trouble, the turmoil, trauma, whatever. You know, you just kind of lose everything, and you don't think. You kind of go brain dead. And I did, and that's one of the reasons I didn't make a video for quite a long time. But today I started thinking about the creation of the covenant. My first covenant I actually created, which was back in 1999, and it went on through to about 3 years ago. Let's say 99, 2009, yeah, about 16 years it went on, and I had put this covenant together when I was in my old house over on Rosewood Street in Dayton. I was teaching this small group of people. We were only like 4 people, and they were coming to me. They were craving the information that I could give them, and I had been studying pretty much all my life up to that point in different religious pathways, and they could see the wisdom inside of me, and so they all came to me and wanted me to teach them. And so it was decided I would start a minor coven, and it was supposed to be a minor coven at that point. And you know, we got to talking about how it was forming into a coven by the time the 5th person came in. And I still remember when that happened, because there was Kat, there was Sharon, there was Rodney, there was Leela, and then there was Ron, and it just kept on growing. So I had to start thinking about what was next. And it came up in one of our meetings that perhaps we should start this covenant. And I had always wanted to, but didn't have a lot of faith in myself at that time. You have to realize I was, 24, 25 at that time. I'd been studying since I was 18, but in other groups and covenants. Never thought about getting my own covenant together until this was put to me through students that were actually asking me to. Some of them were like 15 years above my own age. Some of them were exactly my own age, and others were just slightly below. Anyway, I began the group Covenant Shadow Insights. That was the group that I formed, and it actually became a tradition because it wasn't really based on any particular idea set onto itself by other traditions that already existed, like Alexandrian or Gardnerian or whatever. I mean, there were ideas of these traditions in my head from my studying, and I could say that they had attributed to some degree in the creation of the tradition of Covenant Shadow Insights. But I feel the Covenant Shadow Insights ended up being a completely eclectic thing of itself. You know, a tradition of its own that's set apart from the others. And I felt really good about that. But I really did not feel as good about it as the day that one of my own students asked me a question. It stirred up a thought in my head. It was a question regarding somebody that had broken a rule within our covenant. And we had ground rules laid out, but I wasn't exactly following them. I was getting a little hot-headed. And I had a student, one of my more advanced, more knowledgeable students, question me on it and stand against me on it, saying, you know, if you were going to do this, then we have a problem. And this did not offend me. This actually brought a tear to my eye, because it was the birth of Covenant Shadow Insights as a tradition and a pathway on its own, a covenant of its own, you know. And I call it a tradition of its own because it doesn't necessarily follow any of the other traditions. You know, even the rankship is different from other covenants. And I would go over those in another video. I actually am outlining some of that out already. But it took its first breath when I believe it was Kathleen that stood up for one of the other members that I was on the verge of putting out before actually putting him through the trial that we had agreed to as being a part of our covenant. And everybody should be entitled to a fair handshake, you know, before just being dismissed. And I got a lot hot-headed at that time, you know, and Rodney is actually my best friend, so, you know, it kind of hurt my heart. But I, in fact, felt that I had to stick to laws and rules so that I don't show partiality. But I overlooked the fact that there are certain criteria that has to be met before this could actually be done. So I almost made a major mistake, and it would have been a real downfall for a great many people. Rodney was actually our lightweight, which was a very, very spiritual man within this covenant, and I was the gatekeeper, one that was in the highest place, the highest priest, the high priestess that people upheld and revered. But finally I was being called on something, even while the group was fairly new. But I didn't fret about it. I thought about it and came to the conclusion that they were right, and I apologized to Rodney. We went through the proper motion, and because I had gone through the channels in the improper way, we went ahead and kept him within the group and did not take action against it, which is my recommendation, you know, for my actions, putting the carriage before the horse, you know. But I'm glad about that. I mean, I love Rodney to death. I didn't want him to go, but rules were broken. I went about things the wrong way, and so it counteracted what would have inevitably been done. And I am glad about that. But you see, the covenant was outlined primarily by me because everybody else couldn't possibly be handy at the time that they were really needed there. There were times when some of them could be there and simply take notes for me, write it down, you know, in its first format while things were being decided. And then there were times when certain rules or laws were being brought up and into our midst that would be voted on and decided whether they would be good for us or not, or if they could be improved upon. Now, a lot of the ideas were mine, but they were added to or taken from by other people within the group. The way I look at it, this wasn't created just by me. It was created by Kat, by Sharon, by Rodney, by Leela, by Ron, by Nick, by Tiffany, by so many other people, Angel and Brad, that came into being a part of us. As a matter of fact, we grew quite large, you know. And the only pet peeve that I really had was there were a time or two when I, out of 20-something people, was the only one that showed up. And I started thinking about that, and it really ticked me off because I felt like these are the people that are asking me for my knowledge and wisdom, but they're not coming in for it. But you can bet your ass that a week later they'll pop up in my shop and they'll ask me a question based specifically on something that I had intended to cover on the day that they should have been there but weren't. You know. So, you know, it really kind of started going awry at that point. You know, I like to live a lot of what I say. I don't try to schedule it in, but back then I was trying to do so, being new and leading a group and all. You know, trying to fit in what I could and have it outlined properly. But with me, I found it just doesn't work that way. I am the hippie. It comes to mind whenever it comes to mind, and it's dealt with, you know. And my true feelings actually come out whenever I'm not being pressured by other people and whenever I freely flow like I'm doing now. You know, unfortunately, we had to put out certain people for making mistakes within our group and trying to corrupt what we were doing. And there are things that people can do that would just completely create chaos on the 2 days a week we were supposed to meet to cover this material in only 2 hours time. And there are people that are taking off on their job or asking their job for these 2 particular days off a week just so that they can do what they are supposed to do spiritually. So it fell into some chaos. These are the only pet peeves that I really had. But we were close friends, and even after we disbanded a few years ago, then we stayed friends. We still see each other from time to time. We still come together and we study our information. We talk about new occurrences within spirituality, you know. But we sat around with books and tape recorders for months and months and months and months. And we outlined this way of life that we would live. And that's actually what my video is to be about today, is creating of a tradition or creating of a covenant, whichever way you wish to put it. It actually is 2 separate things. And with the way we did things, we created a tradition and we created a covenant within that tradition. And it was actually very beautiful. We had my nephew in it, who was as young as 13, 14, and conducted himself well. Smarter than the rest of us, by all means. I guarantee you, the boy is a genius. He is, 17 years old now, and he's my pride and joy still, although I don't see how much. We had a pregnant girl who was 17. We had a guy who was recuperating from being on drugs. We've had sitting among us, all at one time, shaman, druid, atheist, believe it or not, Satanist, Wicca, Witchcraft, and more. You know, people that just practiced, wizardry. You know, we had all different arrays of people, and we never once had any fights within the group.